Hi, Priya.
Yes, hey, hi.
I wanted to talk to you about something that's, okay, this is very personal, but I think like since childhood, I used to have a bit of, low frustration tolerance, as they say in the world of psychology. So often what would happen is, I would have anger issues and difficulties coping when things didn't go a little my way or something. So,
Mm,
like, I have often wondered that when I'm working in this organization, that there are so many organizations with huge teams, large teams, and different kinds of employees. So, how do they deal with these minor frustrations and ensure that there are no emotional outbursts? Or how do they deal with this situation where they actually know that, okay, it's perfectly fine to, calm down now, soothe yourself, self-regulate, and actually, go ahead to the next day and discuss it calmly?
absolutely. I mean, it's a very important aspect for all of us. Thanks for bringing this out, Chandrani. And I think it's one of the key components of emotional intelligence as well, if you observe,
Right,
right? It is
right,
about,
right.
I think, self-awareness, self-regulation,
Yeah,
empathy, motivation,
yeah,
and social
yeah,
skills. I think these are the five components of EQ, if I remember
yeah,
from Dan Goleman.
yeah, yeah,
When I work with leaders and when I coach them, there are a few ways in which we have discovered, and I don't know, there isn't one right way or wrong way. I would say in building these self-regulation practices, but I can share what a few leaders have done.
yeah.
So the
That would be
first thing,
great.
of course, wonderful, thank you.
Yeah,
One of the key things that I've often seen people resort to is build a set of rituals, rituals that will help them to center themselves and ground. So that's one practice that leaders have done. And we can talk a lot about what are the different rituals, right? From a very traditional, I remember
yeah.
my mother, grandmother resorting to having a glass of water when they are unable to speak their true voice out, right? So I've seen that happen in it at
That
home
would
where
work.
it would work, I would say, because I've seen it work
Wow.
for them. And
I never
I
thought
think
something that simple could work.
well, I mean, I think water as a great cleanser, right? It has
Yeah,
a
it
as
is, it is,
it
it
has
is.
a great power.
Yeah,
So I think in Asian cultures, we believe water to be very, I think, I
pure
mean,
and
spiritual and religious
yeah, yeah,
perspective,
yeah,
water
yeah,
is
yeah,
supposed to be
yeah,
holy.
yeah,
But
yeah.
at the same time, I've seen people do that. So that's a very traditional thing that we've always seen. But I've seen leaders take a step out, move out, we in psychology terms, I don't know if you've heard about this concept called drama triangle, where
Yeah, 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 yeah. We are all caught in some kind of drama triangle inside our families or inside the organization or everywhere.
yes,
Like it's something we don't really escape very soon. So
yes,
yeah,
in the drama triangle, you always have a persecutor, a
yeah, yeah,
rescuer, and
yeah,
a victim.
yeah,
And
yeah,
when you keep changing, and these roles we keep
yeah,
interchanging them,
yeah,
and that's
yeah.
like the war talks of negative energy.
Negative energy, yeah.
So I've seen, people use some practices of stepping out of this drama triangle. And then and these practices like, take a step back or move out of the scene and come back to it. Or we have this age-old adage, sleep over it, right? So rather than addressing something in a very reactive way, taking that space, so that little space that we take can give us is the space I call as freedom and growth. Because
Right,
if we
right.
react in that situation,
Mm.
we're going to be always, forever be, caught by the emotions of that situation. But just taking
Yeah.
a step out can give us freedom, number one, and it also helps us to build out some other options to address it. So I call that zone as growth and freedom.
In
So
fact,
you
I
can,
think Viktor Frankl has spoken about this, right? That the
yes,
response, like that moment you take between
yes.
your response and what has happened is where your
Yes.
power lies. So I
Absolutely,
think it's
absolutely.
quite
That's
powerful.
the
Yeah.
stimulus and response, right? Between stimulus and response lies control. I think that's what he speaks about. And building some rituals to regulate ourselves under these stressful conditions are very important. Just taking a walk out, having a glass of water, or building some practices which are very grounding practices are need to be applied. So that's one aspect I have seen work very well for leaders, Chandrani. The other aspect that I have seen work in some of the leaders whom I have learned, especially from the research that we did with our the wow factors or the
Right,
women
right, right,
leadership
right.
research that
Yeah.
we did.
Which did quite well. So
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. I remember one of the leaders whom we had interviewed, and her name is Babita Barua, who's the CEO of one of the organizations that who came into the study. She spoke about how she kept her inner child alive. She even had she comes from the advertising industry, and so she had lots of positive artifacts that she's surrounded with, fairy lights, or something like a Snow White, or something like a Cinderella or a superwoman. And she actually had it right in front of her when I was interviewing her, and that reminded me that how much having the inner child alive can make a big sense to regulate yourself. I mean,
That's
going
wonderful. Yeah.
back to keeping that space alive within each one of us, and each one of us will have a different way of expressing it, right?
Right.
In my case, it is dance, and you will have something to
Photography.
keep.
Yeah.
Photography, yes,
Yeah.
that basic curiosity is what that inner child is all about, and
Absolutely.
having that alive in front of us is a great way for self-regulation. And I've also seen some leaders get into a practice of looking at when something is so stressful, and it's a constant in their life, they take a step back and reflect on what types of roles are they leading in every day, and what is the priority that they're giving to these life roles, and is it really meaningful? Taking a step back and looking at their life balance can also help them and gain some perspectives for self-regulation. So
Right.
these are
Right.
some, I can keep talking a lot about it, but in a nutshell, I've seen, people develop some clear practices that will help them to stay grounded. I've also seen leaders tapping into their inner child. Some
Right.
of them have looked at life balance and looked at saying, hey, is that going to help me,
Yeah.
regulate myself better
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
the priorities that I give for myself, for my life? And the other thing that I'm reminded right now is about the TED Talk by Kelly McGonigal, right? The famous TED
Right.
Talk,
Right.
How Do You
Right.
Make Friends with Stress?
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think she speaks a lot about
Hormones.
these the various hormones in our body, and especially she talks about highlights the importance of oxytocin, which is
The
the
happy
love
hormone.
hormone, the
The
happy
love and
hormone, the
yeah.
cuddle hormone,
Yeah.
which really indicates to the body that we need to take support. And that is why when you're under stress, or under where you really need to regulate yourself, having the right and nurturing support system, not disassociating ourselves from the world and going into a silent zone, because our body only knows that that hormone is alive. It doesn't know whether we are happy or stressed, but it
Right.
it feeds
Right.
the hormone, and it really requires support. So having that right support, where having a person to speak to, or having that level of clarity, I think is also a great support for people in the space of mental wellness requirements as well, right? So
Right. Right.
self-regulation, from that perspective also, is important. So these are some ideas that are
Right.
coming to mind, and what people have done, Chandrani, and hopefully we've covered some ground on this topic for
Yeah,
you.
yeah, 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 yeah. It's wonderful. See, it's always nice to talk about self-regulation because I think it's a very, very important topic right now, whether in for people's personal life or whether it's for organizations. So I think it's
Yes.
quite nice, and I'm glad you gave me these tips, and I hope they'll help a lot of people out there also.
Wonderful, wonderful. Glad to share what we all know.
Sure,
Thank
sure, sure.